Today we're going to stumble through building up this super interesting ATV bike. In a lot of ways, this bike build is going to be the antithesis of my preferences. So instead of going 2x, we're going to go with a one range 1x. And it only gets worse from there, guys. We're going to try to set up hydraulic brakes. This is going to be my first time doing hydraulic brakes. Hopefully I won't make a mess. Hopefully the brakes actually work. I know what you're thinking, why do this? It is 2025, new year, new me, and I thought I would try to address some of my fears, mostly the hydraulic brake stuff. I can see their value, their stopping power per dollar is excellent, but I've always been super intimidated by setting them up. So I'm gonna face that fear today. We still are keeping the shifting mechanical because I still think electronic shifting is. This is the Sour Bikes Bad Granny, and it's kind of a modern interpretation of a clunker bike. So this frame design is supposed to harken back to the clunker, but it's got all modern standards. Interestingly, eccentric bottom bracket here. I forget what the seat post diameter spec is, but I did put in a shim so I can run our prototype silver lever actuated dropper post. Pretty sweet. At the cockpit here, we're going to be running some alt bars. I've already learned some things assembling parts for this bike. This uses a PM7 standard. So apparently that's like post mount 7, which means that if you put no adapters, then the default rotor size should be 160 millimeters. All these standards to keep track of. On the rear here, I did have to find an adapter, again, PM7. I think I bought the right one. We're gonna find out pretty soon. The first thing I'm gonna do is install this. This is a crank by a German company called Cybercranks, and it's pretty cool. It uses a Shimano Haltech spindle, but a SRAM 3-bolt mount, so very similar to the cranks we're working with Mary Sales. On here, I've got a 1x ring. This is actually a 1x ring that's gonna be available with our cranks. The length is, I believe, 163, and this is a raw metal finish, but I love how industrial it looks. It's kind of reminiscent of some of the Bullseye BMX cranks, I've been told, or some of the Cook Brothers cranks. I'm gonna hope for a smooth installation, that I have all the parts I need to make this bike-shaped object bike by the end of this video. Hopefully I won't have to stop and order more parts. I've been trying to get this bike together for the last like 2 or 3 weeks, but I keep running into different things I'm missing. Again, we just moved to Spain, so I gave up a lot of my hardware and my tools, and I've been slowly rebuilding and reassembling, trying to make it complete so I can do more bike builds. First thing I'm gonna do is get the drivetrain working, so installing the cranks, and then we will deal with the brake bleed. So some interesting things about the bottom bracket. First off, it is an eccentric bottom bracket. So you can see there's some room to move this up and down and left and right. Just enough space so you can tension a chain. If you're running a, if you're running a belt drive or something like that. The frame also has a split here, so you can get a belt across. We're not doing a belt drive though. In terms of installation, I'm supposed to measure the width of the bottom bracket once it's installed. And given its width, that's going to dictate how many spacers I put on the crank. And according to the spacing, this is going to require 2 little spacers. So this is what those look like. These just slide on. It's knocking out. Okay, bam. Now we're going to slide over the wavy washer. This should just slide on, I hope. Okay. And then we tighten her down. Quite sure what the torque is. Just try not to over torque it. All right, so we got a crank arm. I love these fire marks from the welding. It just makes it look so steampunky and cool. Because you guys know my personal preference would have been to build this up as a 2x, but I guess the main reason I'm not doing that is because the wheels that they had sent for the build were using Shimano micro spline, so not an HG free hub. I had some Q's parts that I was going to build this up with, but ended up just ordering a 12-speed Dior. So which is surprisingly affordable when compared to road drivetrains, right? Like the cassette, the derailleur, and the shifter, I think were like 120 euro. That's barely like that's barely a single road drifter. Put this stuff off to the side. Let's figure out how long the shift housing should be. Actually, I might just put some zip ties now. I think I'm gonna just cinch this down. It'll give me an opportunity to use probably the most satisfying tool I have, and that is a flush cutter here. Just gets right up to it. Nice and smooth. So though it has zip ties back at the chainstay, these are actually, these are guides that bolt on guides. It's kind of nice. Classes it up just so you don't have zip ties all over the place. So what I think I may do is give myself a little bit more slack just in case I end up putting a bag in the front, or I end up swapping the bars and I need extra housing. So that's typically what I tend to do, just give myself a little bit more flexibility, just because I am constantly changing things on the bike. Okay, I've got my housing cut. Wow, just turned into a complete bird's nest. There's probably a better way to have undone that. So I tried to adjust the limit screws in and out to make sure that this wheel's under the smallest cog there, and that this is going far enough. So for the chain, nothing fancy, Shimano 12-speed. I did wax it before mounting it, so I'm just clearing out the wax with a pick, just so that the quick link will actually get on here. I prefer it. I feel like it keeps everything really clean. We do live in Spain, so fairly dry environment, so it works well for us here. It is a little tricky once it's freshly waxed. It kind of throws off shifting a little bit until it gets settled. I don't quite know how to size this, to be honest. You put some chain on the big cassette here, and then you go around your front chain ring. And then you do about 4 or 5 lengths from here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I'm gonna just leave it slightly long, and we'll go from there. Just realize that most of the time I just measure a new chain against an old chain, and without an old chain as a reference. To connect the chain, I do like using a dedicated tool. I know that you can use pedal force, but I feel like it just feels way more secure when you hear it click. Okay. I had mentioned the chain flaking off, and you can see it, all this stuff, and it's gonna get worse. So I think I'm gonna set up the derailleur, flake off more of the wax, and then we'll sweep it up and definitely chain is a little too long. I think I will do a quick check with the derailleur alignment tool just to make sure everything is 100%. Because that is one of the downsides as you add more gears, like everything has to be a lot more antiseptic in terms of setup. This is one of the derailleur alignment tools I've got. This is the Hag by Abbey Toolworks. Let's pick a spot on the rim here. Looks like it's bent in just a little bit. So there were some minor tweaks. Let's see if it shifts that much better. Okay, so I thought doing the drivetrain was going to be the easy bit, but I'm running into a bit of a issue. Shifting mostly works, but the cassette's like obviously wobbly. I don't know what's going on. Like I don't think it requires a spacer, but it's not locking down correctly. So what I'm going to do is take it all apart, very methodically place everything back on, and hopefully I'll fix it. Because mostly I don't have a spacer. Trying to make sure there's no play anywhere. This is supposed to be the easy part, and the hydros were supposed to create the drama. From what I've read online, the last few cogs can be kind of problematic and tricky to put on if you don't get them just right. Okay, it looks like everything up to this point looks good. Pay special attention to these last two cogs. That was it. So there you go. No spacer needed, and hopefully that should really get the shifting well. It's definitely like a lot quieter. It was very clangy before, so if you have a very clangy shifting cassette, all the wobble's gone. It's looking good. Okay. Took a little bit longer than I thought, especially just troubleshooting that wobbly cassette. We've got that. I think I'm going to clip the cable and we'll move on to the adventure that's going to be the brakes. Okay, the drivetrain took way too long. For the next part, we've got some brake shenanigans. These are some brakes that were supposed to go on a different build, but I'm still waiting on that frame. Until that arrives, I'm just going to use it for this frame. However, this frame is a lot longer, so these brakes won't fit. The front is too short, the rear is too short. So what I'm going to do is use the rear hose and put it on the front brake and size it for that. And for the rear, I bought a new rear hosing housing kit, as it were. So this is really going to be a crash course in not only learning how to bleed brakes, but installing them from scratch, since I'm essentially going to be taking them apart. I think the first thing that makes sense is to kind of pre-mount the rear housing on the bike, and then slowly remove the caliper and the lever in the front, mount those to the bike and get that connected, and pump in some fluids. Okay, so just like I did with the shifter, I'm gonna rough this in so it's not just dangling all over the place, and hopefully that'll give this hosing tubes, what do you call it when it's hydraulic, a little time to stretch out here. Okay, I'm just gonna rough it in. So this is gonna go to the right there. Okay. These cable stop things are really nice. Again, not taking it all the way home. Okay, looks like it should be just enough. All right, so we've got the hosing on there. I don't know what to call it. Now time to decouple the caliper and the brake lever from old hosing. I don't make too much of a mess. Okay, so first off, here's the kit I got. Comes with gloves, all sorts of stuff. Gonna wear the gloves. Hopefully try not to make too much of a mess. So I suspect I should probably take the pads out and put in the bleed block. Apparently this lever does not have a retaining bolt, but uses a friction pin. Okay, I got the pin out. Which one of the many blocks here will fit? Not that one. Okay, I've got the pin roughly in there, hopefully good enough. Now time for the scary part, at least for me. I've not done this ever in my life. So got the bleed block in, and I guess in theory I just unscrew this, and this will remove the hose from the caliper, and then I do the same thing here. That end is too small. It's a lot tighter. I might have to mount this on the bike to get enough leverage to remove it, because this is so many small little things that you don't realize you need until you start assembling a bike. Okay, now hopefully this will give me, hopefully this will hold it enough in place so I can actually get some leverage here. All right, yeah, that was on the tight side. Any luck? Nothing will come gushing out. Please don't gush out. Okay. There we go. Hose on the caliper side removed. Part of the reason I've always kind of avoided hydraulics is like there's so many other like different parts. You know, with a cable, there's the housing and then there's a ferrule. But with hydraulics, you've got O-rings, you've got these things called olives, and then these things and other things that are single use. But that wasn't actually too bad. I think what makes sense, knowing how much force was required to break this seal, is I'm going to mount this lever on the handlebar and then remove it from there. Okay, we're on the lever side. I undid this cap. Is this thread on? No, it's just friction fit. Let's undo this and hopefully again things don't gush out. I can't believe how tight these things are. All right. I guess when you tighten these, they say that it crushes the olive, and that's what creates, that's what makes it watertight or oil tight. All right, there you go. We've successfully removed the hose, and it's starting to leak. Okay, so next issue I'm running into, oof, it is starting to come out. This guy is still attached, and it doesn't look like it'll go over. It doesn't look like it'll go over the olive and the nut, so I'm gonna have to cut it and get it out. And it's definitely, everything's leaking on my other hand now. So again, I don't know if this is the best. This is the best way to do it, process-wise. Just feeling my way around. It's a way that made sense to me. Okay, if you heard that pop. All right, so I got this free. All right, so I think the next part is I'm gonna put in the barb and the olive on either end and at least get everything connected so it's not leaking, and then we'll deal with the bleed. It's actually starting to get quite messy. I was hoping that it would be a lot neater. Okay, so now this is when things get interesting. This is all fairly new territory for me. We're gonna put in the barb. So whenever you cut the hose or get a new hose, you have to install a barb and the olive. And I've got this tool which will push the barb into the hose. So this is the tool. Push this in, and there goes the barb. It's being pushed into the hose, and it's pretty easy. Okay, can do this. So we've got our barb installed. So next, we want to put in this thing. I don't know what this thing is called. And then the olive. What happens is when we put the hose back in and start tightening this bolt, it crushes the olive. The hose is bottomed out. Olive is in there, and then we just tighten this guy. So there should be some olive crushing starting to happen. Tricky part, I guess, is knowing when to stop. Give it just a little bit more. Okay, I'm gonna call that good. So you guys, this is the first ever barb and olive I've ever crushed. So let's go to the front end. I think I might leave it kind of on the long side. The idea is that if I run a front bag, I want to give it some space so that it's not crushing it. Because your options are either to run it kind of tight or have that slack in there. And this is actually not as bad as I thought. I did spend about like 2 weeks of watching videos from all different perspectives before I felt comfortable doing this. So there was, a fair amount of I guess, research, if you want to call it that, involved. Beginning to press. See what it looks like here. And it's kind of just fun to play with new tools, learn new skills. I don't think I'm going to put hydraulics on every single bike I own, but it is good to have this knowledge. And by doing this, you kind of know how to repair it when things go wrong. Just realized that I might have inadvertently squeezed the lever. Okay, so for the front, we had this big black cap. We have the nut that goes on there. And then we've got the olive. I'm gonna bottom out the hose, slip in the olive. It's looking pretty good. Actually really kind of stoked on the kit I bought because it seems super complete. I totally had forgotten that I needed a wrench, but it came with that also. Again, I don't want to over tighten that. All right, and there we go. The brake is connected. It's a closed system with a bunch of air in the line. So now we finally do the bleed part. Okay, so what I've read, or actually watched rather, is that what we're gonna do is put in the cup. I don't know if I'm supposed to put fluid in it or not. I'm gonna put a little bit of fluid. And then on the other side, I'm gonna fill up a syringe and push all the red stuff into the hose. So we'll see how that goes. So I'm assuming that the cup is gonna go in here. And the idea is to make this level in the highest part on the bike. So all this time we actually finally get to the bleeding part. Okay, that's gonna require an adapter. Thankfully this kit comes with a whole bunch of adapters. So let's see what's in here. Is this one gonna work? Kind of. Problem is I have no idea what it's supposed to look like. And they're not labeled. Too big. Yep. Got a winner. Oh, maybe this is for the syringe. I see. Does this just go in? No. There's about a dozen of these yellow adapters and they're paired. So one of them, some of the adapters have a pointy nipple. So this would connect to a syringe, I'm assuming. And then there is another set of adapters with just like a little cup. And this is where the cup would sit in. So this should be the right cup shape adapter to receive the cup. Bah! Just gonna stick that there for now. Okay, so we've got this set up. I'm gonna fill up a syringe with some fluid. Actually, I think I'm gonna put a little bit of fluid in there just so that air doesn't come rushing out of the system. I don't know if that's what I'm actually supposed to do, but that's what makes sense to me in this moment. So I gotta say, and this is not a sponsored post for this kit, but I looked at many kits and I'm glad I bought this one. I don't think I have to shake this. So this is a Shimano system. And the nice thing about Shimano is that it uses mineral oil as opposed to the SRAM system, which uses dot fluid. Dot fluid has some corrosive properties. You know, it's not like sulfuric acid from what I understand, but you know, this is, of the fluids out there, this is supposed to be the more neutral one. Okay. I mean, I get that this isn't, you know, hard per se, but I do feel like, you know, like a cable would have been a lot faster. Just getting a little confused with how to attach the hose to the syringe, but apparently this yellow thing is a lock cap. And then you push the tube on there, and then the cap goes on and screws everything together, which makes it super secure, which is nice. Man, I'm really impressed with this kit here. Okay, so I'm gonna fill this up with some fluid. Okay, so I think the way this is gonna go is there should be a nipple, whoops, over here. So syringe goes in here, and then this is, there's an Allen head here that opens up the system, allowing me to push fluid up. Okay. I believe that's in there. Okay, I should just open this up a little bit, half turn. Okay, there it goes. So that means I should be able to, whoa, where are you going? All right, now I'm able to push. You can hear bubbles coming out of the other side. It's a good sign. This connection's not very good here. I've got braking pressure, feels like. I think what I'm gonna do is put a little bit more fluid and push a little bit more through. This feels good. Opening the valve. Okay. I mean, I think I did that right. I feel brakes. Okay, so I've removed the cup. This is all sealed up. I mean, it feels like braking is happening. I'm gonna put the rear wheel in and just make sure. There you go. There's my first, you know, hosing cutting, resizing, barb installing, olive crushing, bleed experience. And it wasn't too messy. Okay, I made a little bit of a mess. But man, this kit, awesome. So what I've got to do next is actually cut down this old rear one so it's the right length for the front, because the front brake is too short. And I'm totally not going to film that because I want to be done before midnight. So I think I'm just going to snap my fingers, and with any luck, we'll have something that looks like a bike. Whew. Okay, it's been about 5 hours since I started filming and working on this. Things just take longer when you're filming, and I had dinner in between, but let's see. Check it out. Got a rear brake and the front brake. Okay, and a big, huge mess behind me that I got to clean up in a little bit. Okay, so what I learned, is it hard? Is it easy? Would I do it again? Am I going to switch all my bikes to hydraulic disc brakes? Probably not. Spoiler alert. So I managed to avoid dealing with the hydraulic brakes for a long time, but a couple bikes have entered the fleets that have hydraulics. And I figured, you know, the new year, you know, perfect excuse to learn some new skills. So while it's probably still not my preference to work with hydraulics, at least I know how to do it. I've proven to myself that I'm capable of learning after watching 2 weeks of YouTube videos. There were a couple things in the build that, you know, were kind of hiccups. The first one, surprisingly, was actually the drivetrain. I was fiddling with the cassette for about an hour. It was just shifting really loud, and then I noticed that the cassette wasn't quite lined up and that it was a little bit wobbly. So then I looked up if I needed a spacer or not, because sometimes you need a spacer with the HG hub, but supposedly with micro spline you don't. And the trick is making sure that everything, you know, lays on the free hub well, especially the last 2 cogs. And I thought I had done a good job, but clearly I didn't. I took everything apart and slowly placed it on, tried everything in different configurations until I got a real positive lock, and it worked. So there you go, 12-speed micro spline, a little fidgety with getting the cassette on the free hub body. In terms of the disc brakes, new tools, to me, there was the cost of the hose cutter and the barb press, not necessary, but I thought it would make things a little bit easier and more precise. That was about €25. And then there was the bleed kit, which I'm glad I bought this one. Super complete, had fluid, had syringes, had bleed blocks, all sorts of adapters, all the small parts that made bleeding a bike seem daunting. You know, I hate starting a process and then realizing that you're missing some random piece because it wasn't included in the kit or whatever. So that particular kit, I think, only cost me about 20 or 25 euro, which is a pretty good deal. In terms of actually doing it, one thing I wish that was explained to me as someone that's mostly only used cable brakes, is that instead of ferrules, you've got this olive and barb and some kind of adjuster clamp system. That's its equivalent, and it's not, and they're not reusable. At least that's to my knowledge. So whereas with a cable brake, you know, you can cut the housing and just reuse the same ferrule. Every time you make a cut to the hosing, I'm gonna call it hosing, you then have to install a new barb and crush a new olive, and you know, make sure you have that screw thing at the end. One thing that's also confusing is that there's various types of hoses, and Shimano says that, you know, some barbs and olives are very particular to each hose. On some forums they say that's not the case. So, you know, what's the truth? And when you get a new brake hose kit, it only comes with enough to do it perfectly. So if you screw up, there's no, like, you know, do-overs, which is kind of intimidating, at least to me. So I wish there was more clarity on what is compatible. You know, even though Shimano says it doesn't work, does it work? So for example, I had to buy an extra bag of some cheap barbs and olives. This is like a knockoff, like Zitto brand that said it was compatible. The olives were a little bit tighter fit on the hosing. They did get on there, and apparently it works. I mean, we'll see. I'll take it on a ride, and if I don't die, then it works. But overall, the process isn't hard. But you know, but now that I've done it and I understand it, I still think I could do a cable brake much quicker. And you know, one thing with a cable is there's no fluids to spill, there's no cross-contamination to really worry about, there's no, you know, like air. You don't have to worry about air. It's just the cable. So yes, while hydraulics is easy once you get it, I'd say I still like stand by that cables are way easier. There's more margin for error, and you know, it's still going to come out okay. Okay, so you're probably wondering to yourself, if you're an expert mechanic, work at a bike shop, what is the point of this video? Why would I watch some kind of hack, you know, do a very mediocre job on disc brakes? Well, I wanted to document my experience as someone that is a die-hard cable brake fan, attempting to noodle their way through using hydraulics. You know, what are the problems that you're going to run into? What were the expectations? How were they not met? I will say one thing that, you know, when you're watching tutorial videos isn't made clear, at least the ones I saw, is actually how messy it is. I'm actually surprised at how much mineral oil I got on my hands, on the floor. I'm glad it's not SRAM brakes. When you watch a Park Tool video or something on GCN, they do it just so perfectly. No spills whatsoever. That's not reality, at least not my reality. Another thing that's kind of confusing is, you know, a lot of the levers have the ports in different places, the calipers, sometimes, you know, the nipple is in a different place, sometimes, you know, there's a hexagonal nut that you turn to open up the valve, sometimes it's an Allen head. So there's just so many variations, and I feel like with a cable, there's usually a hole, cable pops out, there goes another hole, and then a pinch bolt. And it's pretty simple, except for cantilevers, but we did make a video on how to install cantilever videos, which you should totally check out. So I guess at the end, I'm glad I did this, if anything, just to prove to myself that I can still learn new things. I feel more confident that, you know, when a problem arises, I'll be able to at least have a base understanding of how to troubleshoot it. I might not have all the tools on the road, because who carries gloves, syringes, a cup, and some fluid on the bike ride? And barbs and olives and a barb press. Anyways. But I'm hoping it was helpful to you guys. If you're diehard cable people like me, watching someone from your tribe muddle through it and achieve some level of success. I'd say some level of success because it's stopping the wheels in the stand, but we'll see what happens when I take it on the road. Where do you guys lay? Are you hydraulic all the time? Are you still diehard cable brake people like myself? It's weird, like after doing it, like again, I'm not completely sold on doing this to all my bike. And if you guys found this video helpful or entertaining, please consider supporting the channel. It helps us buy things like all these kits and fluids and spend like 6 hours filming this. Join us on Patreon. That's the best way to do it. Or pick up some stickers, and as always, keep the supple side down.